Welcome back to Outside Views. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe for in-depth analysis on Brexit and UK politics. And let's get into today's topic. Brexit was supposed to be about reclaiming sovereignty and unleashing Britain's economic potential. Instead, it seems that one of the biggest beneficiaries of Brexit hasn't been the UK, but France. From high fashion to finance, from tourism to trade, Brexit has handed France a golden opportunity. And let's break down how Britain's loss became France's gain. Brexit fundamentally altered Britain's global positioning, cutting it off from frictionless trade with the EU and dismantling long-standing economic advantages. Many in the UK saw it as a chance to reset, to forge a new path, but in reality, Brexit didn't just weaken Britain. It strengthened its biggest competitor in Europe, France. And first, let's talk about fashion. For decades, London was a powerhouse in the global fashion industry. London Fashion Week was not just a major event, it was a launch pad for new talent, a symbol of Britain's creative dominance. Young designers found their footing there, and buyers flocked to London for fresh ideas. But Brexit had changed that. With Britain outside the EU, doing business in London became more expensive and more complicated. Fashion buyers now prefer Paris over London. London Fashion Week has been shrinking, while Paris Fashion Week has become the uncontested capital of the industry. French President Emmanuel Macron saw this shift early on. He positioned Paris as the place for fashion business to relocate. He hosted fashion galas, wooed investors, and removed regulatory barriers for designers looking to move their base from the UK to France. And meanwhile, Britain made itself less competitive. Scrapping tax-free shopping for international visitors was a disaster. Before Brexit, wealthy tourists came to London and spent thousands on luxury goods, knowing they could reclaim the VAT. Now that benefit is gone, and those same shoppers are choosing Paris instead. Luxury spending in Paris has soared, while in London it has stagnated. British retailers have pleaded with the government to restore tax-free shopping, but their requests have been ignored. And the effects go beyond fashion. Paris has now overtaken London as the go-to luxury shopping destination in Europe. Hotels, restaurants, and entire industries built around high-end tourism have suffered in the UK while they thrive in France. But Brexit's impact wasn't limited to fashion and retail. The financial sector, a key pillar of Britain's economy, has also suffered. Before Brexit, London was the undisputed financial capital of Europe. But when Britain left the EU, banks and financial firms lost their ability to seamlessly operate across the continent. They needed new European bases. France capitalized on this immediately. Paris offered tax incentives, regulatory advantages, and an open-door policy for financial institutions looking for stability. And thousands of jobs have shifted from London to Paris, even though there are still transitional periods running. Billions in assets have moved across the channel. And while London remains a major financial hub, its dominance has been weakened, and Paris has been the primary beneficiary. And this isn't just a theoretical shift, it's a measurable one. London's share of euro-denominated financial transactions has declined, although we still have the transitional period, and trading volumes in Paris have surged. France has managed to position itself as the go-to destination for financial services that used to be handled in London. And that's just one sector. Tourism is another area where France has gained an edge. The UK was once a top destination for European visitors, especially for weekend trips and short breaks. But Brexit introduced new complications. Stricter visa rules, longer boarding queues, more paperwork, and people who never had one now need a passport. And suddenly a trip to the UK is less appealing than a trip to Paris. French tourism has boomed while the UK has struggled to recover its pre-Brexit visitor numbers. And even beyond tourism, France has benefited in areas like trade and business relocation. International companies used to see London as the gateway to Europe. It was where they set up their headquarters and where they hired talent from across the EU. But Brexit made that more difficult. Companies now have to deal with trade barriers, work visa complications, and supply chain disruptions. France seized on this uncertainty. It offered incentives to multinational companies to move their operations to Paris instead of dealing with post-Brexit Britain. And it worked. Companies that once saw London as the ideal base for European operations are now choosing France instead. And while British businesses struggle with Brexit bureaucracy, French companies are thriving. They continue to operate freely within the EU. They face none of the additional paperwork, none of the cross-border delays, none of the costs that now burden their British counterparts. And the result? France is gaining market share in industries where Britain used to lead. Even in education and research, Brexit has weakened the UK's standing. British universities used to be magnets for European students and researchers. EU citizens could study in the UK at the same tuition rates as British students, and that changed after Brexit. Now EU students face higher fees, more visa restrictions, and less funding support. And many have simply chosen to study in France instead. French universities have welcomed them with open arms, offering lower tuition and access to EU research funding. And this isn't just about student numbers. It's about talent, innovation, and long-term economic growth. By making itself less attractive to European students and researchers, Britain has weakened its own academic institutions and strengthened those in France. And then, of course, there's trade. Brexit introduced a mountain of red tape for British exporters. Businesses that once shipped goods to the EU seamlessly now face delays, added costs, and lost sales. Some British companies have stopped exporting to the EU altogether because the new barriers made it unprofitable. And meanwhile, French companies have stepped in to fill the gap. British food and drink exports have plummeted, while French exporters have expanded their reach. It's another sector where Brexit has given France a competitive edge. And this is the reality of Brexit. It was sold as a chance to boost Britain's global standing, but instead it has handed key advantages to France. The UK has made itself less competitive, and France has capitalized on every opportunity. And these effects are not temporary. Once industries relocate, once companies shift their base, once tourists change their habits, reversing those trends becomes incredibly difficult. So where does this leave Britain? The UK government could take steps to address these issues. It could restore tax-free shopping. It could negotiate better trade terms that come with a cost, of course. It could create incentives to keep businesses in Britain. But so far, all of them have done little. And France continues to benefit. Brexit was supposed to be a victory for Britain. Instead, it has turned into, a gift for France. But what do you think? Has Brexit handed France an economic advantage? Can the UK reverse these trends, or is the damage already done? And how should Britain respond to stop losing business, talent, and investment to Paris? Well, let me know your thoughts in the comments below the video. Let's discuss. And if you want to see another video, the next one is right here in the end screen.